During my high school years, my friends and I had an unparalleled retreat. It was a baseball field nestled behind a derelict grade school. We always harbored the thought that one day we'd arrive to find a construction crew dismantling the entire place. But that day never came, at least not during our youth. We attributed this to our town's sheer poverty, a plausible explanation, though its location wasn't exactly prime real estate either. Situated right on the edge of the woods, far removed from most of the town, it was essentially in the middle of nowhere, much like the rest of our town. The primary reason for our fondness was its solitude. No one else frequented it. Occasionally, people would trespass into the school, leaving behind some graffiti. Sometimes the police would appear, but they never ventured onto the baseball field. It was a sanctuary for our friend group, which was incredibly significant given that many of my friends, especially Tim, didn't have ideal home lives. His mother would often call the police on him for any trivial reason she could contrive that day. Yet, at the field, they were powerless. We spent numerous summer nights on the rusty bleachers, smoking and engaged in endless conversations to pass the time. I adored that place. We all did. However, even before certain events unfolded, one particular detail about the location always unsettled me. There was an old lamppost right by the bleachers that inexplicably still functioned. The town must have forgotten about it too. It was one of those lights that emitted an orange glow, and being the sole light source, it enveloped us in its eerie hue. It didn't provide much illumination either. Whenever I'd get too high, I'd gaze into the surrounding woods, shrouded in utter darkness, and imagine someone or something observing us without our knowledge. It would genuinely unnerve me, but then someone would crack a joke or grab my attention, and I'd momentarily shake off that unsettling thought. I often wonder how many times they watched us. I'll never know. One night at the beginning of summer, my friend Johnny and I were headed to the field. I must have departed earlier than him because when I arrived, his car was nowhere in sight. I decided to get a head start and walk to the field alone, a practice generally frowned upon within our group. Although we all liked to believe we were tough, walking through the woods alone at night wasn't a common habit. However, I always found a certain thrill in it. I walked past the school and through the woods to reach the field. I waited for another 10 minutes or so, but he didn't appear, so I started to smoke. Another 30 minutes went by with no sign of him. By this point, the initial thrill had completely dissipated. I decided to walk back to my car, eventually breaking into a jog due to my rising discomfort. I texted him a couple of times, but he never replied. So I spent another 10 minutes in my car before just driving home. When I awoke, I saw that he still hadn't texted back. I was a bit irritated, but I didn't dwell on it until later that day, when my mom inquired if I had seen Johnny recently. I reached out to all our friends, but they knew as little as I did. The last time any of us had seen him was at the field 2 nights prior. A day passed, then another. Soon, everyone in town knew. Search parties became widespread. My friends and I even participated in a few ourselves, but we never found him. No one did. To this day, his body has never been recovered. At the time, I tried to convince myself that he had simply run away. He was an adventurous kid, constantly talking about wanting to travel the world, about how this town made him feel claustrophobic. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't leave like that. He would have at least left us a note, likely on the bleachers where no one else would find it. About a month later, I returned to the field, this time alone. I was so angry at the world that I didn't care if I was attacked by some animal lurking in the woods. But as I reached the end of the woods path, I noticed people on the bleachers. For a second, I thought it was just my friends, as we had never seen anyone else there before. But they weren't. I had never seen these individuals in my life. 3 of them were sitting motionless on the bleachers, like statues, but they weren't the ones who unnerved me. There was another, dancing and skipping around. His unusual happiness made me uncomfortable. At the time, I thought he might be on Molly. Now I just believe he's a deranged psychopath. What was most disturbing was that he looked familiar, yet I couldn't place him. It was like seeing an unfamiliar face in a dream. I knew I had seen him before, but I couldn't recall where. I couldn't tolerate it. It was just too bizarre. So, I tried to leave as quietly and quickly as possible. Fortunately, they didn't follow. Or at least, I don't think they did. When I returned to my car, my initial instinct was to flee, but I didn't follow it. Instead, I drove around the school parking lot. In the back corner, I spotted a car. I recognized the model. It was the same one Johnny drove, but as I saw it, its lights turned on. I abruptly reversed and sped out of there. As summer progressed, I couldn't get them out of my head. I told all my friends about it, and they agreed it was strange, but they didn't think much of it. I even stopped going to the field because of them. One late July day, feeling particularly nostalgic and saddened thinking about Johnny, I decided to look through the yearbook to revisit some memories. That's when I found him. One of the janitors was in the background of a sports picture. As soon as I turned the page, I knew it was him. Same face and hair. It was the dancing man. It had to be. I couldn't believe it. I told all my friends, but they didn't know what to do. Eventually, I went to the police. I'm pretty sure they thought I was crazy, but they still conducted a background check on the man, or so they told me. They found nothing. Even his social security card didn't lead anywhere. I tried to do some research myself, but I couldn't find a single thing. The man was a ghost. Near the end of summer, I returned to the field with a few of my friends. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I looked into the abyss of the woods, I felt afraid. I yearned for the feeling I once had there, but I knew it wasn't coming back. This place was no longer a home to me. When I left that night, I never returned. Near the end of the summer, I was at a Dunkin' Donuts. It was early morning, so I was pretty groggy until I saw him. The dancing man, the janitor. He looked exactly like him. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but the longer I looked, the more convinced I became. Then he saw me and smiled. He hurried out of the store and I followed him, but one of his buddies was parked curbside at the exit. He rushed into the car and they sped away before I could reach him, but what I saw horrified me more than anything else. The license plate of the car they were driving was the same as Johnny's. I knew it because he had a unique plate, 4PAC207. It was the same car I had seen a month before. Then it clicked. That was Johnny's car. They had gotten a paint job, so I didn't notice back then, but I should have. I still beat myself up because of it. I never saw him again, or the car. Nowadays, it's all just a memory, one I wish I could forget. Rest in peace, Johnny. It was the summer of 2024, and my three friends, Jake, Sam, and Marcus, and I were desperately seeking a break from our internship at the Kennedy Space Center. We had been immersed in rocket data for weeks. As avid stargazers, we yearned for a night under an immaculate sky. We meticulously studied light pollution maps and Google Maps, pinpointing a secluded clearing deep within Tate's Hell State Forest, a swampy, desolate expanse in Florida's Panhandle. The name originated from an old legend about C.C. Tate, a settler who mysteriously vanished in the swamp in the 1800s, supposedly cursed. We dismissed it. Ghost stories were for children. We simply craved stars. Our sanctuary was an Airbnb, a cozy cabin near Apalachicola, approximately 30 miles from the forest's edge. After work that Friday, we packed into my Tesla Model Y and Marcus's Mustang, laden with blankets, snacks, and a telescope. We had no camping gear since we planned to sleep back at the cabin. The 7-hour drive from the Space Center was arduous, and we arrived at the Airbnb late, dropping our bags and grabbing a quick snack before heading back out. The final stretch into Tate's Hell was brutal. Narrow dirt trails winding through dense pines and murky wetlands, the air thick with cicadas and the occasional splash of something in the water. With no cell service, We relied on walkie-talkies to stay connected between cars, their crackles cutting through the dark. Around 2 a.m. we reached the clearing, tired but exhilarated. The sky was breathtaking. The stars blazed as if they were within reach. We spread out blankets, set up the telescope, and began our stargazing. 15 minutes later, Sam's voice hissed over the walkie-talkie from the Mustang. He said, "Yo, you see these headlights?" My stomach churned. We turned and a faint glow crept along the trail we had driven in on. Out here, 40 miles from the nearest town, at 2 a.m. in a massive forest, nobody was just passing by. Whoever was out there meant trouble. Jake, in the Tesla with me, grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Flash them, see what they do." I flicked the Tesla's headlights, 3 sharp bursts. An old, rusted and battered pickup truck stopped about 100 yards away. No honk or wave or anything. Then we saw them, a shadowy figure, perhaps 2 or 3, manifested in the gloom, their forms indistinct against the glare. They merely stood there, observing us. It was then that we detected faint, muffled voices, an unintelligible murmur emanating from the swamp. Whispers we couldn't quite decipher. "This is messed up." Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, a note of unease in his tone. Sam sounded genuinely frightened. "Those voices! Nobody's out here at 2 a.m. for anything good." I swept my flashlight around, but its beam was swallowed by the darkness, illuminating only fleeting shadows. The soft, sinister whispers persisted, sending shivers down my spine. Jake, attempting to maintain composure, suggested they might be locals, but advised, "Let's move." We concurred over the walkie-talkies to seek an alternative location, establishing a rule. If those lights reappeared, we would race back to the assumed safety of the Airbnb. We veered off the main trail, convinced that anyone who followed was after us. We sped for a mile down a side path, discovered another clearing, and hastily set up camp, fueled by sheer nerves. Within 5 minutes, Marcus's urgent voice cut through the walkie-talkie. "They're back." My heart sank as those same headlights pierced the darkness, now considerably closer. Then came a jarring engine rev, a clear act of intimidation. "Get us out now," Sam urged. We scrambled into our vehicles, Jake and I in the Tesla, Marcus and Sam in the Mustang. I floored the Tesla, which bucked and lurched over roots and branches, its underside scraping ominously. The headlights remained glued to us, their high beams blinding me in the rearview mirror. Jake, on the walkie-talkie, asked, "Marcus, you good?" Marcus responded, "Barely, they're right there." We were a mere 40 meters from potential assistance, just 4 young, essentially defenseless interns. At 2 a.m. in a place known as Tate's Hell, one does not encounter benevolent individuals. I pushed the Tesla to its maximum, with Marcus keeping pace in the Mustang. The trail curved sharply, and for a fleeting moment as we turned, the headlights of the truck pursuing us vanished. I hoped we had shaken them, but soon after they reappeared, as if toying with us, fully aware of our predicament. We reached a fork, and I swerved left, praying it would lead to the main road. The truck followed. Finally, after much more panic and stress, the dirt track transitioned into pavement, and a faded highway sign materialized ahead. I glanced back, anticipating those headlights, but they were gone. Marcus's Mustang pulled alongside us, and we stopped on the shoulder, panting, gazing into the inky blackness. All we could hear from the forest now were crickets and the crackle of our walkie-talkies. The drive back to the Airbnb was utterly silent. We stumbled into the cabin, securing the door, yet even this sanctuary felt precarious after the night's ordeal. Who were they? We entertained several possibilities: poachers, drug dealers engaged in illicit activities, or perhaps something linked to those voices and the old legends surrounding Tate's Hell. At 2 a.m. in such a place, no one is out for recreation. The way they observed us, the way they pursued us without ever rushing, this was no prank. It felt as though they wanted us to be terrified. We never returned. We do not speak of it, not at the Space Center, not anywhere. However, when I navigate those desolate Florida roads at night, a small part of me has, I believe, become permanently more hyper-aware. In December 2023, I embarked on a 3-week holiday to Japan. My family owns a hotel situated near the small mountain town of Kaga Onsen in western Japan. It was a substantial Japanese inn, or ryokan, built into the hillside adjacent to the Daishoji River. The area surrounding the hotel had been inhabited for at least 2 millennia and was revered as a sacred site. My father had informed me long ago that during the hotel's construction, workers had discovered a few ancient stone blocks and pillars on the premises. Apparently, some form of shrine had been erected there around the 9th century. Having not stayed at that hotel for over 15 years, I was keen to relive the experience. Furthermore, I enjoy exploration, and recalling my father's story, I decided to undertake some off-trail hiking in the forest below the hotel, hoping to uncover any traces of the ancient ruins he had mentioned. Upon my arrival in the nearby city of Kanazawa, I rented a car at the station and drove to the hotel. It was snowing heavily and traffic was severe. The journey, which should have taken approximately an hour, stretched to 2. I reached the hotel around 8 p.m. and let myself in. The hotel was largely vacant in December, as tourists typically avoid this part of Japan during winter. There was no staff present whatsoever. I found myself to be the sole occupant. The sensation of being alone in such a large building in the middle of nowhere was quite surreal. I retrieved one of the keys from behind the counter, let myself into a suite, and slept there for the night. The following day, I ventured into the forest beneath the hotel. The snow was quite deep, reaching my ankles, and trudging through rough terrain in boots was an absolute ordeal. I must have walked far enough into the forest to lose my bearings. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I had been walking for about an hour and was disoriented. Surrounded by trees on all sides, a large hill stood directly in front of me. I thought it would be beneficial to climb to the summit to gain a better vantage point, potentially to locate any signs of civilization. The ascent was arduous, the hillside being quite steep and rocky. However, to my left, I noticed what appeared to be the remnants of a path. I slowly made my way towards it. It was a dirt track that wound upwards towards the hill's summit. The path was somewhat overgrown, with dead branches obstructing the way, but soon enough, I managed to reach the top. However, I observed that the path abruptly vanished. It simply ended. I scanned the hillside and noticed a small cavity in the slope above the path, concealed by vegetation, approximately 5 meters away. I climbed up and found myself facing the entrance to a small cave. A bit of mud had washed into the cave, but the opening was wide enough for me to enter. I had a small flashlight with me and shone it into the opening. I could discern a small alcove directly ahead, with another small opening to the left. As I entered the cave, a distinct odor struck me. I cannot quite describe it, but the most apt comparison is that it smelled like an animal at a zoo. The alcove in front of me was bare, save for a large rectangular stone block positioned precisely in the center. As I ventured deeper into the cave, I found myself in a spacious stone chamber. There were 2 other side tunnels extending from this chamber, but I did not explore them. There was yet another rectangular stone block, this time located on the far side of the chamber and appearing hollow. I approached the block closely, and to my utter astonishment, human bones seemed to be enclosed within it. Surrounding the bones was a long piece of steel and a collection of old bronze coins, those with a square hole in the center. I simply stood there, a mixture of profound shock and disbelief. I reached down and picked up one of the coins. I don't know why I did it, just instinct, I suppose. The coin was ancient and corroded, but some features were still discernible. Before I could examine it more closely, I heard a loud crash emanating from deep within one of the side tunnels. I quickly directed my flashlight towards the source of the sound. The animalistic scent intensified, making the air feel toxic. For some inexplicable reason, I clutched the long piece of steel lying amongst the bones and held it before me with one hand as a weapon. The light from my flashlight revealed that the long piece of steel appeared to be the remains of a long blade. I began to back away towards the entrance. The smell was different this time. I detected the scent of smoke beneath the overwhelming stench. I could hear a rhythmic thumping originating from deep within the tunnel. It sounded like someone beating a drum. That was the point where I lost control. I bolted from the cave, back towards the opening. As I ran out, I swear I felt the entire cave vibrate and shake. I leaped from the entrance onto the slope below and tumbled onto the snowy ground. I had dropped the blade in the snow, but I didn't bother to retrieve it. I kept running, scrambling down the slope, crashing through dead twigs and branches. I ran and ran until I heard the distant sound of a car passing. Soon enough, I found myself by the side of the road. I exhaled a sigh of relief as I collapsed. I managed to flag down a passing car. The driver was initially hesitant to let me in, but seeing my distress, he agreed. Through conversation with the driver, I discovered I was quite far from the hotel, approximately 4 miles. Soon, I arrived back at the hotel. I returned to my room, packed everything, and got into my car. I did not feel safe being the sole person in the hotel. I drove back to Kanazawa, where I stayed for the night. The story has a follow-up, though. When the hotel was fully operational in February, I received a text from my father. He informed me that someone had broken into the hotel through one of the first-floor windows. Surprisingly, nothing was damaged or stolen, except for the front door of my room, which had been smashed wide open with some sort of blunt metal object. I am unsure if this is connected to my experience, but I am definitely not going to stay at that hotel ever again.